really nice phrase. You see this really great paragraph, and you get swept off your feet by it. Again, use it if you want, but you got to put it in quotation marks, right? The first example I'm going to show you is from a student who basically plagiarized for that reason. It's not totally unintentional, but I don't think he went into writing the paper intending to plagiarize any part of it. He just got swept off his feet. He was writing this paper about the national park system. America's system of national parks is one of this nation's greatest contributions to the world's cultural and natural resource heritage. From the huge 12 million acre Wrangell St. Elias National Park in Alaska to small but significant historic landmarks, battlefields, seashores, or monuments in every state of the Union, the park system protects our national treasures and allows people to experience and learn from them. But as our nation grows, the National Park Service's dual purpose to both protect these resources and to let people have access to them has led to increasing friction and conflict, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well written. I'm not sure I would have put a paragraph break there. I probably wouldn't have put started a sentence with, but there's some things that are sort of conventional with maybe journalistic writing and other things rather than academic writing. But it's well written. There's not a punctuation mark out of place or anything like that. And this was a really good student. He got A's on all the earlier assignments. This was his final paper. And he was really a talented writer. I think he actually wrote for the school newspaper. So even the things that were kind of different about it were things that I recognize as being part of newspaper writing and other styles of writing than academic writing. But I did ask him, I said, this is just really great. We love it when our students write this well. We don't usually expect you to. But if this is yours, that's great. You're doing a great job. And he said, yeah, it's mine, it's mine. But at the end of the quarter, I decided I had to double check. And I found the book. America's system of national parks is one of this nation's greatest contributions to the world's cultural and natural resource heritage. From the huge 12 million acre Wrangell St. Elias National Park in Alaska to small but significant historic landmarks, you see it, right? It's exactly the same all the way down to where I have the enclosed highlighter. So I called him in and I said, so, dude, what happened, And he said, it was just better than anything I could write. And I challenged him on that because I don't think it was that much better than anything he could write. He was a good writer. He was going to write an A paper anyway, right? And he said, yeah, I probably could have even done something more interesting than that, but it was just fast and easy. And so he admitted it. It's hard not to admit it when you've got the evidence right there in front of you. And it seemed like the fast and easy way, but this was a guy who was bound to get an A in 102 and move on, and he ended up getting an F in 102. And this was a long time ago. This was 17 years ago, actually, embarrassing to say. And this was when I taught at a semester system college. He had to take English 102 over again on a 16-week quarter. It's not the fast way around, right? So the easy way, the fast way can end up backfiring, right? An hour to write as a passable introduction versus 16 more hours of sitting in English 101. 16 more weeks, sorry, sitting in English 102. So a couple of quick things to notice too. He does cite Lockhart, page 3. This is the foreword from Lockhart. It's Lockhart, page IX, though, not page 3. If we see Lockhart, page 3, down here, we assume the only thing that is being used from Lockhart is that last sentence. And the only thing being quoted is what is in quotation marks, right? Realistically, he could have, let's say, theoretically, quotation mark there, and IX here. It would have been excessive quoting, but I would have known he was struggling with an introduction. It wouldn't be illegal. It wouldn't be, 102 level writing to start with a 2-paragraph introduction, but it would have been legal. realistically, if you're going to use that much from an author, you should introduce the author first. We know everything between, where you mention the author's name the first time, and the page number comes from that author and that page, and anything in quotation marks is from that author's actual words. There are only, oh, I don't know, I mean, he did cite the source correctly. And I had a student say, well, that was kind of stupid, to plagiarize a source and then actually have it in your bibliography so the teacher can find it. But you know, especially with the internet right now, I can know whether any source has ever had a page 3 or whatever that is written about the national park system in the English language. I have access to the Library of Congress. So people used to make up sources, just to kind of throw you off track so you couldn't find the source that you plagiarized. You can't do that anymore. I might not know what you plagiarized, but I know that you made up a source that doesn't exist. Because I can sit at my office and I can find that out in 5 minutes flat. It only took me, 10 minutes to document this, and I had to run up library stairs. These were the old days where you had to go places to actually get to sources. I didn't have a whole lot of sympathy for that student. This one, this one was kind of heartbreaking to me. So this was a student. She was a double major in nursing and criminal justice. Great career plan. She wanted to be a nurse in a correctional facility. Okay. And she wanted to write a paper on HIV infection, on AIDS in the prison system. Okay. And she wrote this great paper. We'll jump down to where the plagiarism is. Here's what she wrote. And we'll talk about this because part of her plagiarism is a definition. We'll talk about how that can happen. Acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS, is a disease that destroys the body's immune system. Those affected with this condition are rendered defenseless against a wide variety of infectious ailments that are not usually harmful to people who possess a properly functioning immune system. In the United States, AIDS first appeared among gay males. Shortly thereafter, cases were reported among intravenous drug users. Among inmates, however, IV drug use is the key risk factor for developing AIDS. Almost all cases have occurred in prisoners with a history of drug use. Because correctional institutions contain a large number of inmates who have a history of IV drug use, and because homosexual behavior is a reality in jails and prisons, it has been feared that these facilities will become breeding grounds for the disease, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, nicely written. I love that definition of AIDS. It is probably the most stylish definition of AIDS that I've ever heard. Acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS, is a disease that destroys the body's immune system. Those affected are rendered defenseless against a wide variety of infectious ailments. It just really clarifies what AIDS is and how it functions. Also with her, I said this is really well written. It was a step up from what she had written before, definitely, in terms of style and effectiveness. I like to see my students improve over the course of a quarter. They don't usually improve that much. But I asked her if this was her own writing. She was sure she was avoiding plagiarism. She said yes, she was. But once again, we find the source. Acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS, is a disease that destroys the body's immune system. Those afflicted with this condition are rendered defenseless against a wide variety of infectious ailments, not usually harmful to people who possess a proper functioning immune system. She actually improved upon it slightly by changing 2 words. In the United States, AIDS first appeared among gay males, shortly thereafter, et cetera, et cetera. You can see she plagiarized these parts that I've highlighted. She did not know how this happened. I did not know how this happened. I brought her into my office. We talked about it. She's like, I don't know how I did this. I did not intend to take any of this information. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but this is a photocopy. This is before EBSCOhost and ProQuest allows you to easily access things online. And as a result, because she wanted to save paper and save money, didn't want to photocopy things, she often would sit in the library and take notes while she was reading. So she sat in the library taking notes on things from these journal articles, and then 2 weeks later, she goes to write a paper. She opens up her notebook. There it is in her green rollerball pen. It looks like her writing. She's got little hearts over the eyes or whatever. And she copies some things directly from her notebook into her paper. I can imagine doing that. I can imagine losing track of things in that way, especially as a 20-year-old student, right? So this was one of those cases where it truly was unintentional. She plagiarized at the note-taking stage. She plagiarized in her notes and then wrote from her notes. And she didn't double check. She didn't go back and double check. Since this happened, this is the first time I taught English 102, actually, these first two examples. And I didn't have this discussion of plagiarism and how it can happen accidentally. I sort of trusted students' judgment on whether they understood it and knew how to avoid it. And I didn't have these 2 days that we'll have in here where we double check for plagiarism. And so, you know, there was just no opportunity for her to double check once it was written and once she'd gotten it out of her notebook. And again, just to point out, she's got Blumberg page 1 here. She's got, where is it? Blumberg page 1. So she has cited the source. What she didn't do is include quotation marks around the borrowed language, right? Also, we need to know that it's Blumberg at the beginning. Otherwise, we might think the Blumberg reference is just that the number of cases is increasing in correctional facilities. It's just that bit of information that she's quoting, that everything else isn't quoted. The definition. So I've had students say, well, how can you plagiarize a definition? A definition is a definition. Not really. I mean, if this is a word-for-word definition, either from the dictionary or from somebody's article, you need to put it in quotation marks. You could say this many other ways. It might not sound as good, but you could say, AIDS limits the body's immune system from fighting off infections that don't affect most people. Doesn't sound as good. I like that better than what I just came up with. But just because I like it doesn't mean I get to use it. And again, in her case, this was completely unintentional. So I want to take just a little bit of a breather before we look at the third and fourth examples. So you might be thinking at this point that I'm just some mean old lady, got nothing better to do than go around and stick it to these students who are just trying to do their best. A couple of things. It doesn't take much time. I documented the 4 cases that I'm going to show you today. I documented in under 45 minutes total. And one of them I actually had to go to the public library because the article was torn out of the one in the in the college library. And this is when you actually had to run upstairs and do things like that instead of just doing it on paper. The other thing is that, like I said, these first 2 cases were the very first time I ever taught English 102. And it was one of the most miserable experiences of my life. I was teaching at a new college. I was expected to enforce these F for plagiarism rules. I failed more people that quarter than I had in my entire 8 years of graduate school teaching. And that was just 1 quarter. And I was sort of sick over it because at some point I knew that I had defined what plagiarism was, told them what it was, told them not to do it, and then trusted that that all sunk in. And that's when I realized I got to do more. I've got to do what I'm doing today, we're going to do tomorrow, and we have to have a couple of workshops. The other thing is, I see my job as helping you avoid plagiarism. I don't think I can do that effectively if you're afraid to come to me with the possibility that you might be committing plagiarism. So if you're freaking out right now, know that at any point this quarter, if you think you might be plagiarizing in your research review, your proposal, your rough draft, whatever, you can come to me and say, oh my God, I think I'm plagiarizing, help me. And I'm not going to give you an F. I'm going to help you, okay? We'll look at it. We're even going to have a day where we look for plagiarism, and when we find it, we're going to celebrate. It's like finding a precancerous mole before it gets out of hand. Yay, we found it. It's like getting weeds out of your garden before they go to seed. Yay, we found it, right? So we're going to have a couple of days, we're going to remove the stigma. Plagiarism is bad. You cannot do it in this class. If you do it, you can fail this class. If you think you're doing it, you get to talk to me about it with no consequences, other than getting help, okay? So if that brings the sweat level down, if that gives you a little bit of reassurance, just know that. If you forget everything else that we talk about today and tomorrow, know that you can come to me about this. Right up till the last day before the paper's due. When the final paper gets turned in, if there's plagiarism in it, I have no choice. F on the paper, F in the class. So let's look at one more example. So from the first guy we learned, don't take the easy way out. The easy way can be the long way if you get an F. You don't want to take this class twice. From the second person we learned, don't be careless at the note-taking stage. It's possible to plagiarize in your notes and as a result, plagiarizing your paper without intending to. I would also say that if you have a nearly photographic memory, and they're about, I don't know, it's about 10% of the public who does, if you read something and you could 3 days later talk to a friend and say, oh my God, there's that one passage in that book that we were reading where he described, you know, the mountains in, you know, some Tolkien location or whatever, and you could actually give the exact words, you probably have a photographic memory. If you remember lines of dialogue from films that you see and you can recite them, if you've only seen the movie once, you probably have a nearly photographic memory. And in that case, it's especially important to remember where you got the information and go back and double check. Because what that means is phrases and words work their way into your subconscious in a way that lingers, and you can call on them later without realizing it. So double checking will be especially important for those people. Tends to be males more than females. I don't know why that is, but men are more likely to have photographic memories than women. So here's another one. This was a completely different kind of situation. This student, he was not a very strong student, and he decided he was going to write about the greenhouse effect because he knew there'd be a lot of sources, right? But then he found himself having to say things like this. What important relationship exists between the causes of the global greenhouse effect and the depletion of stratospheric ozone? The key greenhouse gases, fluorocarbons 12 and 11, nitrous oxide, methane, also affect stratospheric ozone strongly. These gases have atmospheric survival times long enough to permit them to go into the stratospheric ozone layer. In the harsh ultraviolet light there, the fluorocarbons are decomposed, yielding chlorine atoms that destroy ozone. Nitrous oxide decomposition yields nitric oxide that acts similarly. How many of you understand what that said? I expected to make a couple of physics majors or something, but I don't understand it either. And neither did he, which is why he copied it word for word. Okay? You know by now that I have the article. And here it is. And this is Abrahamson, page 236. This is also Abrahamson, page 236. He threw an extra, threw another source in there to throw me off the track, I think. There is nobody named Fisher who has a page 94 that writes about the greenhouse effect in the English language. And it does not appear to have been translated from German or anything. So when I talked to him about it, he's like, I just got so overwhelmed. I don't know how to talk about this stuff. So we learned a couple of things from him. One, choose a topic that will be within your abilities to understand the material, okay? If you choose a topic that has sources that are beyond your abilities, try to find a way of reframing it. Now, if he had come to me, I would have said, you know what? Nobody understands this. And if none of us understand it, why even say it in a paper, right? You could quote it. He could have put it in quotation marks and it would have been okay. I would say probably the better approach would be to say something like, the way the greenhouse effect occurs is complicated. Many scientists discuss it. One scientist describes it this way. What this means is, and then try to put it in layman's terms, right? Quote this, then put it in layman's terms. But even better, I would reframe the entire topic. How about we talk about paper versus plastic, reusable cups versus styrofoam, recycling. Let's get this into household language instead of chemistry language. And then you don't have to write this stuff, right? So then you don't even have to write this stuff. If he had come to me and said, I don't know how to put this in my own words, I would have said, I don't either. Let's find another way to approach the topic, right? So again, what we learned from him is if you don't have to tackle the most technical and difficult to comprehend aspects of your topic, you can quote those if you think they're necessary. If you want to say, the scientists describe it this way, colon, quotation marks, that makes sense to a reader, good for you. What I believe this means is, and then try to put it in layman's terms so that you're kind of educating your reader, that would be a lot better. One last example. Here's a more cut and paste version of it. Stem cell research. I have put in quotation marks the sections that were too close for comfort. So Embryonic stem cells show promise to play a major role in the regeneration of human organs that have been damaged by either disease or trauma. The original human embryonic stem cells have caused a great deal of excitement instead of promise because of their potential role in the regeneration of organs in the human body he had damaged by either disease or trauma, right? And a lot of students have learned that's how you paraphrase. You change 2 or 3 words into a synonym, or you add a word. It's not sufficient, actually. That's what they call it patch writing. It's borderline plagiarism. In this case, it's too close for comfort. I did not give the student an F because this was the only place in the paper where he did it, and it was relatively minor. But you will have teachers who will fail you for that level of borrowing. A better approach would be to say, stem cells show promise in the regeneration of body tissue, right? And that would be sufficient. It's not, again, it maybe doesn't sound as good, but just because it sounds better that way doesn't mean you can use it. If you do want to use it because it sounds so much better, put it in quotation marks. All he had to do, and you can do that, is just put quotation marks around the part of the, sorry, it's too big. Just put quotation marks around the part of the sentence that you can't find another way to say. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's always better to quote too much than it is to plagiarize. You can always figure out later how to put that in your own words, or whether it's even necessary to have the sentence. Questions? Okay, so let's talk about how to avoid plagiarism real quickly. This is on the website, class website. If you want to write it down, you can. If you want to look for it later, you can. So obviously, do not intentionally use other people's work without giving credit. Do not purchase papers. Do not hire somebody to write a paper for you. Be aware of the potential for plagiarism at all stages of the process. Reading, if you have a photographic memory. Note-taking, especially if you're taking notes by copying and pasting things from the web. Drafting, you start writing, and then also revising. And in particular, it's at the drafting and revising stages where we're going to be working on plagiarism and doing some double checking in here for the long research paper. Do not write while looking at your sources unless you're trying to quote. Okay, so if you find yourself, this is more of a physical sense memory thing. If you find yourself writing, looking, once you write something, look at your book and look back. Little light bulb should go off and say, am I copying? And if so, quotation marks, page number, worry about it later, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Let's see. You want to use quotation marks and citations in your notes if you're copying. If you're going to copy and paste, change colors. Always cite the page or paragraph number, author, title, etc. in your notes. That way you can go back and double check it. We're going to talk more about paragraph numbers tomorrow because that's one of the key ways you can avoid accidentally plagiarizing. Remember where you got all of your information, even if you're merely summarizing or paraphrasing a small part of it. There's going to be a point in this quarter, I think it's around week 5 and 6, where you're doing a ton of reading and you feel like you're starting to know all this stuff and you're ready to write, but you can't remember where you got all this stuff that's now in your brain. It's a little bit tricky. So you want to try, develop a system of keeping track of where you got that information. I'll be giving you some help with that when we do the proposal. But you might also want to do it using some highlighters or little post-it tags, color-coded tags of some sort. Let's see. Understand and meticulously apply the MLA guidelines for citing sources. It involves signal phrases, quotation marks, parenthetical or in-text citations, and works cited entries. I'll be showing you guys some of the details in that tomorrow, the details that we didn't have time to get to yesterday. Double check all your work for plagiarism. Don't rely simply on the sense that you didn't intend to do anything wrong. Double check anytime you're using a source. See if you used the language in the source, if it's too close for comfort. So just double checking, that's the key. And then again, if you forget everything else, right? Remember that you can ask me for help and I'll give it to you. I hold you harmless. We'll work on it together. It's part of the learning process, and I don't feel like I can help you with that if I'm not available for it without stigma. Sound good? Question